Hi everyone, welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. Another week and another opposition view. Of course, this time it's the turn of Wolverhampton Wanderers, and I'm pleased to have Dave Azapardi from Talking Wolves back on the show. Dave, thanks for coming on, mate.
My pleasure, guys. Looking forward to it.
So, of course, 4th of December was the last time we met. I was actually struggling to think last night of when the last time the two teams met. Of course, feels like absolutely ages ago because, you know, only 3 months and a lot can change. Of course, two different managers now. And of course, at the time after that game, I think Craig Dawson was our record goal scorer for the season. Yeah. Of course, it ended 4-0 to Everton. Ashley Young picking up his only goal for the Blues. Orel Mangala, who's now out for Saturday, and Craig Dawson. But so much has changed then, hasn't it? I mean, look at Vitor coming in to the club in the months leading after that, and such a different situation for both clubs now. I mean, really, if you look at Wolves, 5 points clear of Ipswich in 18th, so it's looking a bit better, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, yeah, you're right. It feels a lot longer ago, and so much has changed. I remember at the time it was dubbed as the El Saki Code because Dyche and O'Neill were under so much pressure, and even after that defeat, I think so many were sort of adamant that he had to move on, and he kept his job. So yeah, I was there at Goodison actually. It was a disastrous evening, midweek game. It was disastrous, but yeah, things changed, and it's not all perfect just yet. Like you said, we're sort of 5 points clear, so it's looking much better. But I think with the big news, which I'm sure we'll talk about with Cunha's suspension, it puts a little bit more doubt back in Wolves fans' mind, to be honest. So it's going to be, we've got a nice run of fixtures now, or on paper, quite a nice run of fixtures. We start off with you guys, which is tough, but we've still got to play Southampton, Leicester, Ipswich, West Ham, teams in and around us. So it's in our hands, really, but thankfully in a much better position. And just the atmosphere amongst Wolves fans seems to be a little bit more positive than what it was sort of around the time of the reverse fixture when you guys thumped us anyway.
So the last game, of course, that you guys played, very unlucky to come away with a defeat against Bournemouth in the FA Cup, the team that knocked us out. Of course, it could have been Everton versus Wolves in that game, 1-1. I'm sure you were fairly happy with that result away at the Vitality, and of course, unfortunately losing 5-4 on penalties. But of course, apart from that, there was the 2-1 defeat to Fulham. So, while things are looking a bit better, still, I'm sure you'd hope to have got at least a point there against Fulham.
Yeah, definitely, because obviously the week before we played Bournemouth in the league as well, and we went to their place and beat them 1-0, although they did have 10 men for quite a period of that game. It was a really big victory for us, and that's what gave us that gap of 5 points. And I think going into that game against Fulham, because they'd lost that weekend as well, I think a lot of Wolves fans were thinking, we could build a little bit of momentum here. And before the game, Fulham had put out a really rotated side, sort of with one eye on the FA Cup, which obviously worked out for them because they beat Manchester United. But we were really poor. I don't know what happened there. Really, really poor performance against Fulham, and we ended up losing that 2-1. Although we seemed to be on top for most of the game, we just, for whatever reason, just didn't have any bite in the final third. And Vitor Pereira mentioned about how players were tired and struggling a little bit, and I think we saw that even more so on Saturday, just gone in the FA Cup against Bournemouth, 1-1. I think we were quite poor, to be honest, throughout the 90 minutes. I think one moment of brilliance from Cunha with a brilliant goal kept us out of trouble. Bournemouth actually had the ball in the back of the net 3 times, but 2 of the goals were disallowed. And then, it went. I think as soon as extra time came, it was pretty clear what Wolves wanted to do. They didn't have the fitness or condition to go at Bournemouth to win an extra time. So we sat 11 men behind the ball to get it to penalties, and we were 1 kick away from winning that game, missed that penalty, and ended up losing the shootout. So yeah, it's a shame because I think with such a disappointing season, it would have been nice to continue and have a little bit of a cup run. There's still some great teams in the competition, don't get me wrong, but I think everyone could beat everyone in that competition at the moment. So it's a shame, but all focus now for us on the league. And like I mentioned, some really big games coming up for us, starting with this one against you boys at Molineux on Saturday.
It's definitely a massive shame because, like you said, when you look at the teams that that are in it, I think for us as well, there's a lot of Evertonians thinking, what if? Because now City are the only team left in it and Aston Villa that you look at that are real threats, but both of them on their day are beatable. And, you know, I think not just that, but I mean, if it had been us, I think, and it had have gone to penalties, I think Wolves probably would have beat us because we seem to go out every year on penalties in the cup.
Awful. Our record's awful. I looked at that as well because it's weird because you never know with your own team because we don't have many you don't have many penalty shootouts. There's not many opportunities, and I had a look at it after our game. And we've won like 1 in our last 8 or something. We've got like an awful record as well. I think 5 in our last 16 or something like that. If I'm going back like 20, 30 years.
I think Everton. I think maybe the last 10 years, I think we've had about 8 or 9. And I think we've lost all of them. I think the last one I can remember us winning was the 2009 semi against United. Apart from that, we just don't win them. And that's why I was a bit. Do you know what? Going into I listened to your shootout on the radio, and I was just thankful it wasn't me because, of course, we went out on penalties this year to Southampton in the Carabao Cup. We went out at the Carabao Cup last year to Fulham on penalties. We went out to Leicester a few years ago as well. It's just horrible, isn't it? But let's talk about Vitor Pereira because for Everton fans, he's a very clouded figure. Some players are linked with Everton constantly every single window. One of them was João Moutinho, who funny enough also played for Wolves. Another manager was Vitor Pereira. Every single time we were managerless, his name would come up every single time. Of course, Farhad Moshiri never pulled the trigger on that one. And we've ended up with lots of different managers over the years, but I wasn't quite sure what to expect of him coming into the league. It was actually quite interesting for me to see what kind of manager he actually would be. And to be honest, for the team, for where Wolves are, 17th place, you'd forgive them for getting in somebody like Sean Dyche, who we had, just to drive yourself away from it. But took a risk there with Vitor Pereira, and he's come in, and to be honest, he's done a pretty decent job so far.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if he keeps us up, he's done his job and done it, very well. I think the issue was after, obviously, we had that string of like defeats, including the one against yourselves. I think everyone wanted to pull the trigger on Gary O'Neill, but there just weren't the options out there that Wolves wanted. I think, although Wolves were struggling because of the ownership model and because who sort of linked with the club, they've never. It's weird. They've never really looked at the likes of managers, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but managers in the mould of Sean Dyche, there were people like Steve Cooper and stuff linked. I think Wolves just felt that because they've been established in the Premier League for that long, they probably should still be aiming higher. And if you believe rumours, some of the managers they approached it was crazy. I mean, Moyes was one of them, to be fair, at the time. Potter, there was Conceição, who's ended up at AC Milan, Allegri. But ultimately, the recruitment model and the financial position of the club, none of those managers would have touched us with a barge pole going into January. To be fair, they ended up backing Vitor Pereira. So I think if they said to any of those managers, I'll give you 80 to 100 million in January, I think some of them may have jumped at the chance. But in the end, we went with Vitor Pereira. And to be fair to him, in terms of experience, he probably had better experience than a lot of those managers out there. Obviously, never managed at Premier League level. There were question marks over what he'd done in the media with, obviously, when he was linked with the Everton job and going on Sky Sports and things like that. I mean, I listened back to that and I've just thought to myself, what are you doing? I've looked at different things. But to be fair to him, he's doing okay. And I think the positivity that he sort of gives out is reflected on the players as well. Under Gary O'Neill, it was very, in my opinion, quite negative, although I don't think he would have meant it in that way. There were certain things where he was saying in the press conference, if you look at the bookies odds, we won't be we wouldn't be favourites for this game. You should have the belief in your players that you can go onto the football pitch and win every single game. And that's the sort of difference between Gary O'Neill and Vitor. So, been very stubborn with his system, which is fine with me. Started off really brightly, beating Leicester and Manchester United back-to-back. Been a few games where people have thrown a few question marks towards him, but at the moment it seems fairly positive. between the fans and sort of the management there. If you look at his CV, he's a bit of a journeyman. So if he'll be here next season, I don't know. I'm sure if we stay up, he will. But yeah, fairly positive still at the moment.
Well, of course, I mean, if things could have been different, you mentioned our manager David Moyes there. You mentioned Sean Dyche as well. It's highly plausible that Vitor Pereira maybe could have ended up at Everton a couple of months ago. Of course, that didn't happen because of the sort of extraordinary situation around David Moyes, and that he'd pretty much retired and then decided that Everton was the job that he would come back for. He signed a 2.5-year deal, and so far it's gone really well. Of course, I mean, we're 15 points clear now of relegation. I think pretty much now you could class us as safe when you look at the three that are down there, and I think it's probably the same with Wolves as well, that you could class them as safe now. So thoughts on that, because I think it was handled very well by the club. They looked at the timing of it. We'd gone on we'd picked 3 points up against Arsenal, Chelsea, and City in our last three before, and then of course the loss against Bournemouth. But we weren't doing too bad if we were in a relegation dogfight. We weren't doing too bad at the time. But of course, the new American owners coming in decided just to be proactive and get rid of him and bring David Moyes in, and it's brought a huge amount of resurgence among the fan base. It's brought people to be a lot happier for the final season at Goodison. What are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, I ask everyone pretty much on these opposition views, and everyone says that Sean Dyche is a man that comes in and does a job and leaves. And he's there to do a job, isn't he? But you're pretty much the same as that, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I said to Everton fans sort of before the reverse fixture, I thought, he's not the worst manager in the world, but I think with the way that Everton wanted to go, and sort of you got a new stadium, you get a new ownership in, as a club you want to go upwards. And again, no disrespect to Sean Dyche, I just don't think he was the coach or the manager to continue building and take Everton to the next level. I think Moyes, there were a lot of Wolves fans that wanted Moyes when Gary O'Neill was under pressure, and I think he was probably, we felt at the time, fairly realistic, but was a number one choice among a lot of Wolves fans. And I think the appointment from Everton at the time, I felt it was good, and you can see now, you're pretty much out of any relegation worry, and I think you can start to enjoy the rest of the season now as well. It has brought positivity. I can see a lot more positivity amongst Everton fans that I know of. He's bringing the best out of certain players like Beto, who I think was quite well thought of before he moved to Everton and really, really struggled. And it's really interesting what certain managers can do. And you got the new manager Bounce, but he's continuing to score goals as well, which I think Everton fans will be delighted with, especially with the likes of Calvert-Lewin being fairly quiet in front of goal. So, there's lots of positives with it. David Moyes isn't a long-term option. I think Everton fans can appreciate that as well. But if you look at what he did with West Ham, sometimes it wasn't the most attractive football, but look at their league positions, what they achieved with him in certain periods. I think if David Moyes can get you on that pedestal, ready for the next level, and when he's ready, maybe in a couple of years' time to say, thank you, I'm finished, Everton will be in a much better place than what they were when he rejoined you guys a few months ago.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, to be honest. And I think one thing I noticed as someone who was around for the back end of the David Moyes era and seeing him now is that he's a much different manager now. I think he's a lot more street smart. I think back in the day he was a lot more defensive than he is now. I can see the changes in him that, of course, we've been letting more goals in than we did under Dyche, but we've been scoring about 4 or 5 times more. I mean, we of course beat you guys, but 4 of those goals, it didn't really feel like a 4-0 win to me.
Well, at the time, you guys have gone on a run of not scoring in about 5 as well. That was such a crazy result for us. Yeah,
it was a crazy result for us. I remember the atmosphere in the ground just being a little bit somber and a little bit a feeling of, do we even celebrate this? Because it felt a bit unbelievable, to be honest, that the goals had been scored. I mean, the Ashley Young free kick was a little bit, textbook, some poor defending from the set piece by Wolves. The Mangala one was a brilliant goal, and then the other 2 are own goals. But, I mean, if you take that 4-0 win and then you take the 4-0 against Leicester with David Moyes, and you look at the difference in the players and the quality of the goals we were scoring, and being on top for 90 minutes and not letting up. Then you look at the 2 goals we scored against Manchester United, the 3 goals we scored in the first half against Tottenham, the 2 goals against Liverpool. It just feels a lot like when we let a goal in, we're not out of a game anymore. And that was the same with Brentford as well last week. That, you know, we went 1-0 down and we didn't feel out of the game, which felt to me like a massive change, a massive shift, because our team out of possession is able to move further up the pitch and be able to occupy that other half a lot more. And that's just really what we wanted. And an old David Moyes side was operating on a shoestring budget. You know, a lot of players playing in a lot of roles that they weren't familiar with. Yeah. And often we'd get to a point and not really go any higher. This time, although we're still struggling in the bottom half of the league, it feels a bit more though you can rely on the team a little bit more, and you can rely on the players that are coming in to do the job that they're being asked of. And it definitely just feels a little bit more like everyone's being given a role to do and everyone's doing it. Whereas under Dyche it was the complete opposite. It felt a lot more like there was 11 players who were just going out and having a kickabout without really any sort of roles being given to them or any specific tasks to help the team win. And I'm really happy. I mean, a couple of years ago, Moyes wasn't someone that I would have wanted back, but seeing the difference in himself as a manager, and I think we saw that with West Ham as well. I mean, he's gone abroad since then. You know, he's managed United, Sunderland, West Ham, and he's clearly picked up on a lot of those jobs, a lot of small intricacies in his coaching that he's using now that are a lot better, while also having that romantic, nostalgic side that we all really look back on. And I mean, and there's one of them in the lineup quiz at the end of the show today, a famous win against Wolves. But let's talk about the likely lineup for Saturday. We can't do it without talking about Cunha. I mean, realistically, he's always been quite a reliable player. Maybe playing in the Wolves system, a little bit outshone by different players, but now he's really the main man in that side. But who else are we looking at for Saturday? I mean, there's players as well. His name escapes me now. That the young fullback as well. There's Aït-Nouri as well. Yeah, who. There's players in this Wolves side, and I think when you compare that to the other 3 down at the bottom, let's be honest, you wouldn't take any players out of their side in yours. Yeah. But for Wolves, there's definitely some danger men, isn't there?
Yeah, I sort of agree with what you said there. I think in terms of strength, our squad is definitely stronger than those 3. It's just that do Ipswich and Leicester have more fight than Wolves to stay up. I think that 5-point gap at the moment and much superior goal difference basically means Leicester or Ipswich have got to win 2 more games than Wolves this season. I just can't see it happening as of right now. But Cunha is going to be a massive loss. He has been reliable. Our season has pretty much been the Matheus Cunha show, whether it's good things or bad things. You know, the really stupid suspension after it was Gary O'Neill's last game against Ipswich was a massive brawl after full time, and Cunha was a heart of that and ended up getting a few match suspension, which should have been far longer. And then he lost his head completely at Bournemouth. I still right now don't know what he did and why he acted in that way. It was 1 minute left of extra time and he reacted like that. And a lot of fans have reacted quite negatively to that. And I think some fans would actually be happy to see the back of him. See the back of him in the summer window. But yeah, he's gonna be a big loss for us because he's a huge player. In terms of players who can stand up, we that's what we need to know. We don't know who's going to step up for Wolves. Strand Larsen is a very capable striker who's had goals this season, struggled a little bit with condition and fitness at the start of the year, had a little injury and just come back, struggled to get back into it. The midfield, I think, is where the game is crucial for Wolves. We've got Andre, fantastic player that we signed in the summer alongside João Gomez. I think both players are destined for bigger and better things. Vitor has sorted us out much better defensively. You know, you mentioned earlier the joy that Everton had from set pieces. That was a huge Achilles heel for Wolves under Gary O'Neill. That's pretty much been sorted out. But now all of a sudden the goals seem to have dried up a little bit at the other end of the pitch. So it's who's going to step up in Cunha's absence to get the goals. We've got Hwang returning, not really been at his best. Rodrigo Gomez, who's a really young, bright talent who's just come back into training. So I'm intrigued. I couldn't sort of player for player right now, I could not tell you how Vitor is going to line up on Saturday because there's so many question marks over fitness and who he may or may not introduce as well. But Cunha's going to be a big loss. It's just who steps up. And I think this is a massive opportunity for someone like Jurgen Strand-Larsen, who's been a little bit of a scapegoat the last couple of weeks, for him to step up and show his quality and start putting the ball in the back of the net a little bit more often.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking about that and then talking about Everton, there's dangerous players for us as well that I maybe wasn't expecting to become so intertwined in the squad a few months ago. I mean, the likes of Jake O'Brien, who got his first goal against Brentford. Of course, Beto is now on, I think, about 6 goals just this month alone, in February. And then you look at, Jesper Lindstrom's come in and found a little bit of a place in the team. Of course, missing Iliman Ndiaye, he's the big one for us. But any players that you look at on the Everton side where you think, oh, yeah, I'd have them in our team, I think they're the ones that I for me, obviously, Cunha's the one that I'm happy he won't be playing. Is there any you look at where you're thinking, they look the best player in that team?
Like I said earlier, Beto is starting to hit that he has hit that form, and it's obviously a little bit of a worry going into this game. Is he going to, continue that form? But I think, David Moyes is starting to get, the best out of some of these players, and there is talent in that Everton squad, that physicality in the midfield at times as well, which I think that's going to be a really interesting battle on Saturday. But I think, I don't know, set pieces, although we've improved a lot, is still a worry. I think especially like a team like Everton, who could cause problems from set pieces. I think that's still going to be a concern for me going into this game, to be honest. I think the likes of the big centre-backs playing, they could cause us problems. And like you said, David Moyes, experienced manager now, a little bit more streetwise, he's going to know what teams are good and what teams are bad at. And I have no doubt that, especially away from home, he's going to try his best to get the best out of set pieces. So that's an area that I'm probably a little bit worried about going into this game. So
finally, let's talk about, just before we go into our lineup quiz, score predictions for Saturday. I mean, for me, I think our record at Molineu's been a bit wishy-washy. Last season, of course, we lost 3-0 there, I think I remember. Season before, we had that fantastic last-minute goal from Yerry Mina, which set us on the road to staying up. But I mean, since Wolves returned to the Premier League, bar I think it may be the game during lockdown, we've really it's been a tough place to go for Everton. But so, are you confident going into Saturday? Do you think you can walk away with 3 points?
I used to look at the history of the fixtures, and like you said, we have had a couple of good games, or quite a few good games at Molineux since we came back up, like you said. But so against Fulham, we hadn't lost at Molineux for like 40 years, and then they beat us last week. So, before last week, I probably would have said, yeah, I'm a little bit more confident. But it's just, you just don't know what Wolves team are going to turn up at the moment, and that's what I'm a little bit worried about. How are we going to react and adapt to life without Cunha? I think it'll be 2-1 either way. I think there will be a winner in this game. I think both teams will score, but I think the 2-1 either way is probably what I'm going to say. I think my heart is saying Wolves, but my head is saying that Everton. I think with the form that you're in, you're still on an upward trajectory. I think that Everton might nick it, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, 7 unbeaten. You couldn't have predicted that 3 months ago. 4 wins and 3 draws. And I mean, for this one, I'm going to predict a very similar game to the one we had against Brighton at the Amex last month, where we won 1-0. It was a penalty that separated it. But you know what? I feel like this one might be a bit of a, for the neutrals, I feel like this one might be a bit of a good watch. I think this one might go under the radar a bit this weekend, because there's standout players in both sides, and both teams will be really up for this one. Because I think if Wolves get 3 points this weekend, and I forget who Leicester are playing. Chelsea, and of course Ipswich are playing Crystal Palace. So, if both of those teams drop points and Wolves win, I think that's pretty much safety then. So, of course, it could go either way, this one, and I think for neutrals, they might be sleeping on it a bit, because I think Everton Wolves might be the game to watch this weekend, especially with the likes of Aït-Nouri, Beto playing. It's going to be one that there's standout players on both sides. It's not going to be a slugfest. I think this one will be played a bit more like a game of chess compared to the one that we played back in December, which was just throwing the ball in the box and either team hoping to get a sniff of goal. This is one of the grounds I've been to, of course, Molineux, and the season before, by the time I went, it was 0-0. I think it was Strakowalesi or Jelavic had a goal disallowed, and then, of course, the year before, a really great Everton win that a lot of people look back on under the David Moyes era was the 3-0. At Premier League, 9th of April 2011. I remember watching this one really vividly. A bit of a team full of Barclaysmen, really. I hate to use the term now, it feels a bit outdated, but for Wolves, there's a lot of, barring maybe the defence, there's a lot of players in this team that I think I look back on and sort of just pre the sort of relegation thing that you might. I think was it the year after this. I think that you guys went down. But how many of those do you think you could probably get if I gave you the 11? I think there's only one of them that are still playing football at the moment.
I'll probably get close to getting all 11, maybe. Yeah, I would say so. Is this the game? The Russian guy that you had, Dimitar, Billy
Letinov, yeah.
All that game, if it's the correct game I'm thinking of.
I think it might have been this game. I remember Phil Neville. I think this was the Phil Neville game where Phil Neville scored an absolute worldie, and he never. I think that might have been the only goal he ever scored for us. Something like that, yeah. I think it might have been the reverse fixture, or the year before was Billy Letinov. It might have even been this one.
Yeah, I'd have a good go at getting the 11, I reckon.
Yeah, well, Billy Letinov did start for us in this game. I mean, when you look at it, there's a lot of old Everton players that I wouldn't remember. Skodran Mustafi, you remember, former Arsenal centre back, was actually on the bench for Everton on this day. You had like Anichebe, Osman, Baines, Jagielka, Heitinger, who's now of course at Liverpool. How many could you get? Because a couple that are fairly well known Wolves
from the Wolves game, from the Wolves team.
Yeah, from the Wolves team.
I reckon I could get. I'd have a good go at the 11. I reckon I safely could get 8 or 9 of them. I'd say.
Okay, so the goalkeeper, there's a goalkeeper that started. The goalkeeper on the bench also played for us as well.
So is it Rice on the bench? No, who would be on the bench to play for Everton?
Well, I think actually the player on the bench for Wolves in this game started the fixture the season later for Everton. Only played about 2 games for us, but try and get the obvious ones from the starting 11 off first.
I would say in goal, Hennessy in goal.
Yeah, Wayne Hennessy. Forget that he played for Wolves. He always reminds me of Crystal Palace.
Been on the bench then? Marcus Hanneman or Doris de Vries?
Yeah, it was Marcus Hanneman. I don't know if you remember, but he had a spell at Everton. I think he signed for us in the January window on loan, and I think he played about 1 or 2 matches. And I think we're the only.
He was crazy. Yeah. He was the game where you remember. Oh, this is going on a massive tangent. When Andy Gray and Richard Keys got, it was Wolves against Liverpool, and Sean Massey was the lineswoman, and she made the wrong decision, and Hanneman got the ball and threw it at her. Like he was an absolute nutter.
I mean, I think I saw him play. Yeah, I've got a weird feeling that he might have played the next game. I think I went.
To be fair, it wasn't awful. He was.
I think I went to Molineux. It must have been May 2012. It was the same day or the day after the FA Cup final, and I remember yous were already relegated, I think, or you were about to get relegated. You were really struggling. I've got a weird feeling that he might have started, but he's a trivia quiz question in for Everton fans. Marcus Hanneman, probably the only team in the history of the league to have 2 American goalkeepers at the same time, because we had Tim Howard as well starting for us. But in terms of the rest of the Wolves team, there's a couple of like ones that I think I could probably get.
Yeah. So I reckon Jody Craddock maybe at one of the centre backs or not.
No, he was on the bench.
So probably Richard Stearman, Christoph Berra.
Yeah. Christoph Berra and Richard Stearman. Yeah, you get those two.
Kevin Foley.
Yeah.
Right back. He would have been left back that season. Stephen
Left
Ward.
back.
Or Ella
No,
Kobe.
see, Ella Kobe. Yeah, I was going to say he's the one that I would have remembered. He's the only one from that whole team that.
He's okay.
Really
he's a manager at Maidstone, I think. He's doing okay at the moment.
See, I just remember him for being massive. He was really strong. I think he had like 99 strength on FIFA. I think that's how I remembered him. But the midfield, there's one in midfield that I'd completely forgot about.
So I would say midfield. There's a few options there. You've got Carl Henry.
Carl Henry started, yeah.
Yeah. David Jones, maybe.
No, I think this player. I think he might have gone to Palace afterwards, but I might be misleading you there. I might be getting them mixed up.
So you got Carl Henry, Dave Edwards, maybe.
No.
Wingers will probably Matt Jarvis and Michael Kitely, I would say. Matt
Jarvis played. I'm not sure who would have played on the right because Matt Jarvis was a left winger. One of them's quite a prominent broadcaster now, who gets a little bit of hate on social media.
O'Hara.
Yeah, O'Hara. Jamie O'Hara. Jamie O'Hara started. But I'm not sure who probably would have played on the right there,
so
Dave.
Right, but who else? Is he English, this guy?
One of them's African. I won't tell you the exact nation, you should probably get it. The other one is a forward.
What is it?
And then there's two forwards. I think it's like a 4-5-1, yeah, but I can't see an obvious right midfielder here.
Guardiola.
Yeah, Guardiola, yeah. Am I right in saying he went to Palace after that?
He was at Palace and Forest, I think. And
he's one that I remember, who I literally forgot about until I read this lineup here.
Striker could be one of three, so if I had to guess, I'd say Stephen Fletcher.
Yeah, I think he's the one who still plays. Is he still at Wrexham?
Wrexham, I think, yeah.
Yeah, still playing. More. Yeah, he had one of the best football chants. I still sing it in my head now when it comes on the radio. It's been like incredibly used ever since, but I remember this as being the first one to use this chant.
It would be Ebanks Blake, huh?
Yeah, Sylvan Ebanks Blake.
Oh, yeah, that chant. That's a great chant, wasn't it? That
yeah.
Back in the goal music days, whenever he used to score, they would play the music for the chant.
Yeah, but it comes on now, and see, I'm a bit older than it. I'm 24, but because I go to uni, a load of my mates are 19, 20, and whenever we hear that song, I sing Sylvan Ebanks Blake, and they're like, "What are you on about? Like, you don't remember Sylvan Ebanks Blake?"
That's Barclaysman, that is proper Barclaysman.
Definitely, mate. And then on the bench, I can name Michael Mancian. I think I remember him. Jody Craddock. You would have had Stephen Ward, Adam Hamill. Nenad Miliash came off the bench for Ebanks Blake at half time, and Michael Kitely as well. So you did pretty well there, Dave. I mean, the Guardiola one was tough. I wouldn't have been able to get that.
No. Yeah, obviously, without the hints, I might have got like 7 or 8 of them probably.
Yeah, I remember Jarvis more playing for West Ham than I do Wolves. But then the Everton team, I mean, if you want to talk about Barclaysman or the David Moyes era, Tim Howard, Sylvan Distan, John Heitinger, Phil Neville, Tony Hibbert, Phil Jagielka, Leighton Baines, Billy Letonov, Magai Gay, Leon Osman and Jermaine Beckford.
Wow.
And of course, it was 3-0 this one. It was Billy Letonov scored in the 45th minute, so I think you were right about Billy.
Goal, I think. I'm sure it was that game, yeah.
Yeah, so that's it. Before we leave, you didn't get a chance to come on the channel for the reverse fixture, and I've been asking people their sort of Mount Rushmore for their club. So in terms of Wolves history, because Wolves, I don't think a lot of people realise this, but Wolverhampton Wanderers are one of the most historic, oldest football, institutions, going right the way back to the late 19th century, and not a lot of people realise that if you look back at old FA Cup games in black and white, it's always Wolverhampton Wanderers. And of course you won the league back in 59, I think, was we 59 or 60 or something like that.
In the 50s, we were like, top end. That's why I think we played. I think it was Blackburn was singing "Champions of England." You'll never sing that to us a few weeks ago in the FA Cup. And,
it's worse. It's worse when it's Leicester. It's honestly.
Yeah. But like because you don't know the history. I mean, if you want to talk about, I mean, Wolves are probably more decorated than a lot of clubs outside the sort of traditional top 4, top 6 at the moment. So no, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of clubs, isn't there, that you look back on and you think it's mental that it's never really, they're never given the appreciation they deserve for a lot of reasons. One of them is mainly how commercial football is now, and there's not really any respect for the times that have gone before. I think if you're not going to look back 100 or so years ago at teams that were winning the European Cup or playing in World Cups and stuff like that, then in 100 years you'd have no right to talk about Erling Haaland and Mohamed Salah because that's the way it works. But in terms of Wolves' history, who are the 4 main guys where you think that if you were building a statue?
I think I would probably stick with the 4 stands that Wolves have got, because I think that probably is the 4 main people. Steve Bull would be one, and that's probably one of my few regrets is that I'm just a tiny bit too young to have ever watched Steve Bull play. I've met him, dealt with him in real life, such a sound guy. Steve Bull, record goal scorer, played for England a major tournament outside of the top division, never played in the top division for Wolves, but was called up for England. Stan Cullis, who was the manager during those years, during the sort of the 50s and 60s. So again, up until probably the 2000s, one of the most decorated managers in English football. Billy Wright, who was the captain during that time, first player in the world to get 100 international caps. And then probably Sir Jack Hayward, who was the man, Wolverhampton born, who bought the club when it was on its knees and basically about to go bust, and sort of got us back to where we needed to be, and then sold the club for a tenner because he wanted to just hand it over to someone who could invest a little bit more. So yeah, they're the 4 stands at Molineux, and I think I'd back those 4 because they're probably 4 of the most iconic figures really in Wolves history, I would say.
Yeah, Steve Bull stands the away stand, isn't it?
Awful stand, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going. You're so far away from the pitch. It's been, do you know what? It's been well designed as an away stand because I know our away stand at Goodison is the absolute pits. It's may as well be underground.
I know people that love it because of the stadium, and it's a great stadium, but it's an awful away end.
Yeah, you can't see anything.
I went to the upper a few times, and
the upper's a bit better. I'll
go to the lower because it's worse in the lower. I didn't realise. I just went more in the upper because it like the ceiling and whatever, but the lower's as bad. But I was like doing that to watch the rest of the game. But
you can't see anything, can you? And I went to.
Probably did me a favour in the football, to be fair.
I went to Bramley Moor, the new stadium, a few weeks back, and it was weird. There was no posts, and I could see the whole game, and I wasn't going like this, heads up and down like that, and it was weird. But I think. Do you know what? It's nice to hear that you've gone with those 4 because I think it's nice to talk about really old football or any sort of pre-90s really. It's nice to talk about as though as people our age can't remember it. I think way too much time is given to the Premier League right now. It's just constantly talked about all the time, and I think the so-called Big Six that play up there. I know Wolves fans feel a lot the same way as us. That they love talking about themselves. They never love giving anyone else credit. So but I think this Saturday should be a pretty good one. But thanks for coming on, Dave. Pleasure to speak to you.
You too, man. No, thank you for having me, and may the best team win on Saturday.
And where can we find all your stuff for Talking Wolves?
It's at Talking Wolves everywhere on all the socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then YouTube, where if you want to see me either really happy or upset after the game on Saturday evening, you can jump on there and see my reaction anyway. Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Of course, make sure that you like and subscribe to the Toffee Blues. Get your score predictions down in the comment section below, and we'll see you in the next one.